Galileo Galilei. In the 1600s, suggesting that the Earth revolved around the sun wasn't just controversial, it was considered heresy. An Italian scientist, Galileo, dared to look through his telescope and challenge this long-held belief. His detailed observations of Jupiter's moons, the surface of the moon, and the phases of Venus provided indisputable evidence. Earth was not the center of the universe, but merely one planet orbiting the sun. The Church was not pleased. Galileo was summoned before the Roman Inquisition, forced to recant his findings under threat of torture, and spent the rest of his life under house arrest. His books were banned, his ideas condemned, and his reputation publicly destroyed to preserve the power of institutional authority. Yet today, Galileo is remembered as one of the founding figures of modern science. What made him dangerous was not his error, but the truth he spoke with clarity, precision, and courage, long before the world was ready to accept it. Ignaz Semmelweis. In 1847, Hungarian physician Ignaz Semmelweis observed something shocking. Women were far more likely to die of childbed fever in hospitals run by doctors than in those staffed by midwives. The reason? The doctors were moving directly from performing autopsies to delivering babies, without washing their hands. In an era before germ theory, the idea that invisible particles could transmit death seemed absurd to most. Semmelweis introduced a chlorine hand-washing protocol, and mortality rates dropped dramatically. But instead of praise, he faced rejection and hostility. His peers couldn't accept that they were the cause of death. It threatened their authority and shattered their pride. They mocked and ostracized him. He was forced out of his hospital and eventually committed to an asylum where he died alone, likely from injuries sustained there. Only years later did germ theory, championed by Pasteur and Lister, prove him right. Today, Semmelweis is hailed as a pioneer of antiseptic procedures, and the failure to believe him is considered one of medicine's most haunting tragedies. Nikola Tesla. Nikola Tesla saw the future more clearly than almost anyone of his time. He envisioned wireless energy, smartphones, clean power, and global communication networks. His invention of alternating current revolutionized electricity, but his more futuristic ideas were dismissed as fantasy. Tesla built prototypes of wireless power towers and remote-controlled machines, inventions far ahead of their time. However, investors like J.P. Morgan pulled out when they realized he couldn't monetize free energy. Tesla was smeared by competitors, called eccentric and insane, and died in obscurity in a New York hotel room. One of Tesla's most bitter battles was against Thomas Edison in what became known as the War of the Currents. Edison championed direct current, DC, and launched a vicious public campaign to portray Tesla's alternating current, AC, as dangerous, even going so far as to publicly electrocute animals. Despite the smear tactics, AC proved more efficient and scalable, and ultimately became the world standard. Tesla won the war but lost the spotlight. Alfred Wegener. In 1912, German meteorologist Alfred Wegener proposed something bold. Continents weren't fixed in place, they drifted. He noticed matching coastlines between Africa and South America and similar fossils and geological formations found across oceans. He theorized that they had once been joined in a supercontinent he called Pangaea, which slowly broke apart over millions of years. His peers in geology ridiculed him. Wegener wasn't a geologist, and they found no plausible mechanism to explain how continents could move. The concept of drifting continents seemed far-fetched. He persisted, continuing his research despite the hostility and skepticism of the scientific establishment. Wegener died during an expedition to Greenland in 1930, never knowing that future discoveries would validate his theory. It wasn't until the 1960s, with the discovery of tectonic plates and the mechanisms behind seafloor spreading and mid-ocean ridges, that Wegener's theory of continental drift was fully embraced. He had seen the planet's motion long before technology could confirm it. Today, Wegener is recognized as a visionary who unlocked the dynamic nature of Earth's crust, laying the foundation for modern plate tectonics. Barry Marshall. For most of the 20th century, doctors believed ulcers were caused by stress, spicy food, or poor lifestyle choices. Barry Marshall, an Australian physician, thought otherwise. Alongside pathologist Robin Warren, he identified a bacterium, Helicobacter pylori, in patients with ulcers. But the idea that bacteria could thrive in the stomach's acidic environment was considered absurd, even laughable. Unable to convince the medical community, Marshall took a drastic step. He drank a culture of H. pylori himself. He became seriously ill, developed ulcers, and then cured himself with antibiotics, definitively proving his theory that bacteria were the true cause of most ulcers. Though risky and controversial, his self-experiment was vindicated when research confirmed H. pylori as the primary culprit behind gastric ulcers. Marshall and Warren were awarded the Nobel Prize in 2005, cementing their groundbreaking discovery in the history of medicine. What was initially dismissed as madness is now a critical understanding that has reshaped gastrointestinal medicine forever. Marshall's courage to go to such lengths in the name of science forever changed how the medical community views bacterial infections. John Snow. In 1854, as cholera tore through London, most scientists blamed bad air or foul smells, a belief rooted in the miasma theory. However, Dr. John Snow had another idea. He believed the disease was spread through contaminated water and was determined to prove it. Snow meticulously mapped every cholera case and found a disturbing pattern, a cluster around a single water pump on Broad Street. His investigation led to the removal of the pump handle, and soon after, the outbreak began to slow. However, many of his peers rejected his theory, stubbornly clinging to the outdated miasma theory for years despite Snow's clear evidence. Snow's work wasn't just about the pump. He pioneered using data, spatial analysis, and statistics to understand disease transmission. His careful observation and logical reasoning laid the foundation for modern epidemiology. Today, Snow is regarded as the father of epidemiology, and his methods continue to shape public health responses worldwide. Charles Darwin. In 1859, Charles Darwin published On the Origin of Species, proposing a theory that would forever change how we understand life, that all species evolved through natural selection. The idea that humans shared a common ancestor with apes was radical, challenging long-held religious and scientific beliefs. Darwin's theory was met with fierce resistance. Many saw it as an attack on divine creation and morality. Scientists, religious leaders, and the public alike rejected it, labeling him a heretic and a fool. The debate became a national and international controversy. Despite the backlash, Darwin's ideas slowly gained acceptance. As more evidence, such as fossils and genetic studies, emerged, the scientific community began to see the power of his theory. Today, Darwin is hailed as one of the most influential scientific figures, and his work laid the foundation for modern biology. Rachel Carson. In 1962, Rachel Carson published Silent Spring, a quiet yet powerful book warning that pesticides like DDT destroyed ecosystems and endangered human health. She meticulously documented how these chemicals accumulated in the environment, causing cancer, killing birds, and decimating beneficial insects. Her writing gave a voice to the Earth's most vulnerable creatures, urging humanity to consider the long-term consequences of industrial actions. Carson faced a coordinated backlash from chemical companies, who launched a smear campaign against her, calling her hysterical, unscientific, and emotionally driven. Politicians and industry leaders labeled her work un-American, dismissing her claims as alarmist. However, Carson stood firm, supported by meticulous research and a clear moral vision. Her book sparked a national conversation and led to significant policy changes, including the eventual ban of DDT in the U.S. Carson's work laid the groundwork for the modern environmental movement, inspiring future generations to consider the broader ecological consequences of human actions. Roger Bacon. In the 13th century, Roger Bacon was a philosopher and Franciscan friar who proposed something shocking for his time: that truth should come from observation, experimentation, and reason, not just scripture or tradition. At a time when the church held absolute authority over knowledge, Bacon's insistence on empirical evidence was seen as a direct challenge to religious dogma. He studied optics, astronomy, and languages, and even outlined concepts for inventions like flying machines, magnifying lenses, and mechanical devices. Bacon also predicted the development of gunpowder and machines that could fly. His insistence that scientific inquiry should be based on direct observation and controlled experimentation, methods that would become foundational during the scientific revolution, was radical in a society that believed in divine revelation as the ultimate source of knowledge. Bacon was condemned by church authorities, placed under house arrest, and largely forgotten for centuries. However, his ideas later resurfaced and gained acceptance as the foundations of modern science began to emerge. The monk, once silenced for his heresies, is now celebrated as a visionary, and his contributions are considered an early spark of the Renaissance's embrace of reason and evidence-based inquiry.